looking forward to having a chat over the next little bit about solving problems that matter, and specifically sort of social enterprise in a design thinking in a social enterprise sort of startup context, mapped together pretty nicely with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so I'm sure most people have probably seen the SDGs over the last year or two. They've become very sort of popular and getting more and more mainstream. They've been around for a little while now. I think it was 2015, the current sets, and with a 2030 target date. So when you start looking at some of these themes and the goals, we've got some pretty significant systemic problems and challenges that we need to take on. And no one individual or organisation or government can do this. This is something that we all need to work on together. And there's plenty of things that we can do, no matter what our situation, to be aligning our efforts to help progress these SDGs. And social enterprise, I think, is a really powerful tool to help progress that. So the question of what's a social enterprise, for anyone that's sort of deep in and around the social enterprise sort of sector, this question sends shivers because there is no universally agreed definition. And it's normally the start of a very robust conversation around definitions and boundaries and what's in and what's out and everything else. I thought I'd put what Social Traders, so they're the certifying body in Australia. They've recently updated this, their website and their definition as social enterprises are an innovative breed of businesses that exist to create a fairer and more sustainable world, focusing more on what the well-established and universally agreed principles of a social enterprise is, and thinking of it more as something that we do rather than something that we are, an entity. The key thing is you have a clearly articulated social and/or environmental purpose. So it starts with that intent. You need to be able to demonstrate and have that meaningful intent. You'll also notice there that despite it not being the name, social enterprise is very much about the environment and climate action, not just social justice and equality. And then one of the key ways that social enterprise then delivers on that purpose is business, selling a product or service as a key source of revenue. And that's actually using market models as a way to deliver on that purpose is a key part of what a social enterprise idea is about. So I'll try and mostly use the term social enterprise idea, get away from the language of using it as a noun. I still find that really tricky, but that's kind of the focus. And it's really about having that clearly articulated purpose, and then a paying customer who is then going to buy your product or service, and then that's a virtuous loop. And even thinking beyond social enterprise, just business in general now, the whole expectation of what a business is and what it does is shifting, and has shifted pretty dramatically, especially in recent times. So especially if you're getting a new idea to market, if you're purpose-driven explicitly or a social enterprise, that's not even exclusive to that territory now. It's if you're launching a new product or service or a new business idea, operating ethically and sustainably is now pretty much a ticket to the game. If you're not doing those things, it's very hard to attract people, customers who want to buy your stuff, talented people who will come and work with you because they want meaning, fulfillment from their work and life, because they're the one and the same. Investors increasingly don't want to put money into things that are hurting people, exploiting people and polluting the planet. That's just bad risk. So just taking a operational, financial, reputational risk perspective, you'll see over the last 18 months or so, a massive shift in access to capital and where capital is going by investors. The biggest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, has been increasingly saying for the last several years, if you're not doing the right things by the people and the planet, you don't get our money anymore. And everybody wants to be in BlackRock's portfolio because they have a lot of cash. So Larry Fink, the chair and CEO, said January last year, he signaled this is going to be the biggest asset movement and access to capital movement. And then January this year, he went, and it's happening even faster than they predicted. COVID has actually accelerated these macro trends, not slowed it down. And so we've got this massive opportunity, no matter how you look at it, to actually use business as a a powerful good and to create a positive impact. So we often talk about triple bottom line, which is obviously everyone knows about measuring business success in terms of profit. That's kind of traditional business, but triple bottom line then also equally measures success in terms of outcomes for people and the planet. And so it's bringing those three things together, which actually the combination of those things is a sustainable business. Just having the financial sustainability sorted, if you're polluting the planet and exploiting people, no longer a sustainable business model, and it's definitely not risk-free. So triple bottom line is becoming the way to think about things. And that's the segue to design thinking. So as a key tool to be able to get in and apply some of these approaches, the definition I normally use for design thinking is it's just a human-centered approach to innovation and solving complex problems, especially. And despite it not being in the name, it is as much about thinking as doing. So doing is a massive part, if not the majority, of design thinking as an approach. So hopefully everyone's pretty familiar with the double diamond. I think one of the most beautiful shapes ever created came out of the Design Council in the UK in the early 2000s as a really simple way to abstract the design process as a way of solving problems. So design is just a problem-solving approach. And so by being able to simplify it down to this shape of there's a problem diamond where we're looking at, are we actually solving the right problem? And there's a solution diamond, is it the right solution for the problem that we identified? And we go through a stage of diverging. So when we're in a problem diamond, we're gathering information, exploring, discovering, talking to people, and we can't do that forever. So we need to converge and make sense of it. We get to the point in the middle where we now hopefully have this really sharp clarity. And based on that clarity and understanding now the real problem to solve, which will always be a bit different to what we thought we were starting out with, at a minimum, we'll have a new mental model and language around it because we've spoken to the people who are actually experiencing the problem. Now we go through another divergent process of exploring many possible ways that we might solve that problem. That's where we need to resist not just jumping to the solution idea we had when we started. That's what most of us tend to do is we'll go do some research, then we'll go and build that platform that we thought about on day one anyway, even though some of our evidence might have led us to actually there might be these other ways that we could solve this problem that might be more meaningful. And then as part of the convergent process in the solution diamond, that's when we're prototyping, testing, iterating, and refining. And in reality, we go through lots of diamonds all the way through. So we're always collecting a bit, making sense of it, collecting a bit more, making sense of that. And it's simplified, but I find it a really powerful mental model for thinking about the problem-solving process. So thinking about that first diamond, the problem diamond, which is my favorite, and the one that everyone wants to skip over and get out of as quick as possible, because it's where there's the most uncertainty and discomfort. We don't know, and we don't like not knowing. So we tend to jump this process and try and get to making up solutions because we feel more comfortable and certain there. But for me, the problem diamond is all about understanding the people, the problems that those people are experiencing, and the context that they're experiencing them in. So that's that first diamond, and it's all about getting clarity and building that really deep empathy for the people, the problem, and the context that you're focusing on. Einstein is attributed, at least, with the quote of, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and just 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And the point there is that when we've got this really sharp clarity on the real problem to solve, then solutions come quick and easy. I think most people by now would have seen the Cognitive Biases Codex, over 180 documented cognitive biases. This is a pretty awesome codex, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's an interactive version as well, so you can drill down on each of these biases to get more information. But this is what our head looks like. We've all got our own version of these biases that have been shaped by our own lived experience. And the good news, hopefully, is that every other person in the world has their own version of that. So we're all dealing with our own view of the world, which is shaped by how we've lived so far and how we've responded to it. And that's tuned our cognitive biases. So when we start thinking about our ideas, if we're just, even if we've got the lived experience of it, if we're just thinking about what's in our head, at best we're a market of one, not a good sized market. So, and then other people are going to be experiencing it in other ways. And that's why we need to go out there and talk to the people who you think your ideal customers are, because we're full of assumptions. And we need to have assumptions. We're always going to have incomplete and inaccurate information. There's no such thing as perfect information. If we waited for that, we'd never do anything. So we do need to make assumptions, but we need to do them mindfully and identify which ones are the risky ones and go test that thinking quickly and continue testing that thinking as we iterate through. So this whole process is really about dealing with complexity, with the people. And when we're dealing with people, we need empathy. We need to build up that really deep understanding of how people think, feel, behave, what motivates them, how they make decisions, what's important to them. These are things that we really need to build a deep, meaningful understanding of. And there's three types of empathy. There's the cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. And the neuroscience actually shows that these three different types of empathy activate different parts of the brain. So they actually hit different brain centers, but then they layer on top and work together as well. So the cognitive empathy is that seeing things from other people's perspective, which is often the word or the phrase that people will use when I ask them, what does empathy mean to you? Most would say something along the lines of being in someone else's shoes, by which I know they mean seeing things through someone else's eyes and taking their perspective. If you're just in someone else's shoes, you've just stolen someone's shoes, and that's not much good to you. But at least it's an attempt at language of going of doing some perspective taking. I'm seeing things from a different view, which is awesome and a critical part. That's where we'll start building up understanding of people's mental models and the language they use. But without the emotional empathy laid on top, it's also where mass manipulation and sociopaths live. So even sociopaths can develop cognitive empathy. They can understand your mental models, your language, and use that to manipulate you. If you don't have the emotional empathy, then that's a risk. The emotional empathy is then going that much further, where I now feel with you. And so it's an emotional connection beyond just the intellectual cognitive function of it. And then the compassionate level of empathy is, I've done the other two, and now I'm moved to do something about it. I can see you need help. There's a situation where I can help, and I now need to take action. So when we're talking about social enterprise and social impact space, this is the area of empathy that we need, where we're actually moved to take action. And we've all got it. It'll be about different things, but we've all got some level of that compassion, well, most of us, unless we're a psychopath. And it's a muscle, though. It's something that we build over time. And a lot of that starts with self-awareness. It's very hard to build empathy from a place of not being self-aware and not being in a positive mindset. When we're closed down and defensive, it's very hard to be open and building empathy with others. Through that synthesis of all the things that you've heard and making sense of it, it's then being able to find what those key themes are, but getting down to some real insights, and off the back of that, some opportunities. And then having a fresh, meaningful level of what the real problem to solve is, the problem that really matters. And that's the point that I mentioned before, at the midpoint between the two diamonds, of really sharp clarity. It's now clarity that's built on meaningful insight and evidence and empathy. If you haven't spoken to at least 10 of your target customers, you shouldn't be moving past this point. Let's say you have, awesome. And you've learned some awesome stuff, and you've really refined your understanding of what that problem is to solve. You feel you've got some sharp clarity on that now. Now that time to go and explore that divergent process of understanding what are the different ways that we might solve for it. the solution, and the business model. So this is all about getting clarity on what your solution concept actually is before you start building and launching it. What actually is this thing? How does it work? How does it hang together? What's the end-to-end experience look like and feel like? And then prototype and test and iterate. And so the early prototypes are conversations. They're sketches. They're a long time before any built product that you might take live. And you want to be able to iterate as quick as possible based on what you're learning. I love the phrase, prototype like you're right, test like you're wrong. So we can't just leave it all up in the air and go, customers, you tell me what you want. You've got to take a position and you've got to be able to articulate that in a way that you can test it, applying a scientific method. So you have to have something that you can take to people and go, my understanding is, and test that thinking. So prototype like you're right, you've got to take a position, but test like you're wrong. Scientific method is not, I want to go validate my hypothesis. It is, I will test my hypothesis. I'll have a testable hypothesis that other people can test using predefined methods and see if they get the same results. And I want to show to myself, and I want other people to show to me where I'm wrong so I can make it better. That's the mindset to bring into this. Unfortunately, it's become common language in the startup world over the last couple of years more, that we seek to have a validated idea. It's semantic, but I think it's dangerous. If we go into this process seeking to have validation, we will find validation. Again, that confirmation bias is right there, ever present and really powerful. So if we're seeking to get validated, we'll find the data and the evidence that shows where we're right, and we'll be extremely optimistic, because you can't be a startup founder or social enterprise founder without being irrationally optimistic. It's a key trait required. Then we'll find all the evidence that we want to go, yep, my idea is awesome. My mum told me so. I'm building it. I'm going to invest 100K and the rest of my life on it. Don't do that. Prototype like you're right, but test like you're wrong. So the key question is then, how do I actually know when it is the right solution? And that's where the other iconic image from design of 3 lenses. So that view of what's desirable, what's viable, and what's feasible. And applying a design thinking, human-centered design approach, we always start with the people, which always means we start with desirable. What do people actually want? What motivates them? What do they find appealing? What do they actually think about the solution idea when it's an idea, not a built product or solution? Does it actually create meaningful value? Are we actually solving a problem that really matters? So we need to test that thinking, but we also then need to have the viable lens. So can we actually afford to do it? Do the numbers stack up? How much will people pay? How much can I expect to have coming in? Can I actually have more money coming in than is going to be going out? If you can't make that equation work on a spreadsheet, it will never happen in real life. So you at least need to have a financial model on paper as a prototype where you can find a way to break even in a reasonable period of time. And then the feasible, can we actually do it? Have we got the skills, or can we get the skills in to design, build and launch this thing and continue to run it after it is live? And are we the right people to be doing it? It's an unpopular question, that one, and we tend to think that we're the right person for everything. I know I do. But sometimes we're not the right person, or we at least need to be partnering, collaborating with some other people who are the right people.